Hi, this is Jim Reavis, CEO of Cloud Security Alliance, and welcome to the AI and Cloud Threats and Vulnerabilities Summit, where we are focusing on a lot of the really exciting activities that have happened in the industry that I'm sure you're very much aware of regarding vulnerabilities. And so for my session, what I'm actually going to do is to talk a little bit more of a deep dive in what we've been mentioning with our AI Risk Observatory. So let's get into it. So this is something that is this collaboration between the CSA organization and our new CSAI Foundation, which is a pure play focused on AI. And what we are really trying to do here is to define and devise how we can have a strong collective defense. And you're hearing about mythos and other things like that we need to address, very important issues. And there's a lot that we need to do inside individual organizations, and you have your own responsibilities in your enterprise. But at the same time, we got to think about the ecosystem and what we need to be doing together as a community. So you've seen, and this has, I think, been reported probably a repeat of other sessions here, just that we have incredibly decreased the time that vulnerabilities become weaponized, and down to 9 hours, where it was months just a few years ago. And so it's like been a 99% decrease. So a lot of different things, a lot of Firefox vulnerabilities found through Mythos. So we got to understand how we're dealing with this asymmetry. So our coordination infrastructure it's got a long history, and the original certs was developed in response to the Morris worm, which probably happened before most of you listening to this were born. I think that was 1988 was the Morris worm. So what we need to be doing is to understand that these are not institutional failures, but AI is actually inverted sort of the economics of the discovery and the weaponization. So just a few things here. NVD enrichment gap, NIST has said that they're going to shrink down further the amount of vulnerabilities that they're actually going to enrich. The disclosure coordination is really a challenge because of how quickly some of this goes. One of the big ones is just the taxonomy. You see something like the model hallucinating or doing something that seems odd. What is that? Is it a vulnerability? Is it an incident? And so they don't necessarily map cleanly to the different categories we created, which were developed before AI was broadly available. And then clearly, we operate in a lot of silos, and there isn't some unified routing that happens between all of these different systems that are out there to deal with the different incidents and different vulnerabilities. They all either stay within one or they get discarded completely. So our vision for the AI Risk Observatory, you could say, it's being able to observe signals in a broad sense, understand each of those signals, how we can classify them into a more structured record and understanding of what it actually is. Coordinate how we are able to use these different channels, these different communities, different organizations that are out there, so that we can have it at the appropriate place where they can take action on it. And then take all of this in those first three and be able to influence standards and create sort of the next generation of the appropriate best practices in how this ecosystem should operate and what changes might be necessary. So we've thought about this, ideated this AI Risk Observatory into 6 work streams now, which we are going to be getting underway, and you're going to be able to help participate in this for whatever makes sense for yourself, your expertise, and your organization. So you can see them all here. I'm going to go into them: AI Vulnerability Clearinghouse, CVE Numbering Authority, our Risk Rubric, our Taxonomy, NVD Enrichment, and then telemetry coming from a lot of other organizations. So let's start with this AI Vulnerability Clearinghouse. It's quite possible that you've been hearing about this from some other people associated with CSA or some of our team that is really wanting to figure out what we do here. So we know that Mythos and similar models are just going to create a lot of different vulnerabilities. So what we want to do is to capture this. And so here's what we think are some of the key design principles on how we do this. It's got to be global, got to be multilingual. It's got to be open to both the individual researchers, which are very often the backbone of vulnerability discovery, as well as larger organizations. It's very important because of that we have an on-demand self-service intake and automation. It's very important that we are able to deal with the widely adopted, the pervasive IT systems, but also very unique systems, OT, industrial control systems. This is something that we are understanding more and more with the rise of these advanced models, that the OT ICS is going to be under significant attack, and we got to have some new strategies. And then again, this routing happening between the different institutions is very important. So if we think about what that whole landscape is, there's just a lot of different areas. There's the bug bounty programs, there's the CVE program, there's the vendors, product certs, there's ideas around how you do disclosure, there's the national channels that are out there from different countries, different regions. Then there's industries that are often manifested in ISACs, so like the FS ISAC, retail, others. Then there's the foundations of open source, which if you read through the original Anthropic Mythos report, it was all open source, were the vulnerable systems. We know closed source is an issue too, but we definitely need to have that focus on open source as well. So I talked a little bit about the OTICS and then academia, and then some of these other systems that sort of provide more information and we call enrichment around different vulnerabilities, greater context. So the question is, how do we do this? How do we get the most out of this landscape for all of these signals? So that's an open question. We're all going to work on that together. So workstream 2 is the idea of CVE numbering authorities, or CNAs, being AI competent. And this is still sort of work that's underway. So Cloud Security Alliance, you may have heard we are a CNA right now. Our scope is our own software base, and we are looking to basically expand that scope to agentic AI and look wherever those types of vulnerabilities are not properly handled or they're outside the scope. We want to be that sort of catch-all there. And I think there's going to be a lot of other organizations that want to do that with us. So really what we are looking to do is to expand those scopes for CNAs and work with CNAs, which we have quite a few that are inside of CSA, to create some greater consensus. So let's work with the CVE organization on how they're thinking about this, and I encourage everybody to participate in their working groups if you're eligible. And then also CSA will have sort of our own parallel working group to do some additional research on how we do that coordination. So workstream 3 is Risk Rubric is the name we have for this, but it's public transparency. And so there's a lot of information that's out there in the public domain that we think we can sort of improve our understanding of all of the risks out there just by monitoring these systems. So Risk Rubric right now, it's a suite under development of community-based security scanners, and then we create public leaderboards around this. So the original one, Risk Rubric, has been out for several months, but we are updating it to make it more of an open standard. So CSA creates the standards, and then if you have technology that does model scanning, then you can just plug right in and we will link to yours, and we're going to hopefully have like a really large network of these LLM scanners. So the others that are under development are one for MCP, and one that has a prototype out there already for OpenClaw repositories. It's basically scanning the framework repositories that are out there to look at how hardened they are and to give you a score. And I think we're just going to expand upon this, and we're going to look at what are different types of agents. We just expect so much agent diversity that we need to really work on that, and we really need to be able to understand everything that's out there. So CSA is really focused on the standards around what good and bad are, and so it's much more like our STAR program in that sense. And we want to work with the industry to create to marry that with the technology they create. We'll create some technology within working groups as needed. It's getting more and more accessible to do that. So Workstream 4 is another thing that we've done some work. There is a GitHub repo, but it certainly is very early and open for your feedback. But what we're trying to do here is to create ways without changing the identifiers that all of these organizations have for incidents and vulnerabilities, but to create sort of a grammar in order to create some linkage between these different systems. And so the thing we call SecID, encourage you to go check out the repo. Maybe you have ideas on how we can enhance that, but we think this is sort of a good way to think about it and have sort of a very lightweight sort of vocabulary, grammar approach to how we link these different systems. So workstream number 5, this is all about NVD enrichment. So National Vulnerability Database, this is something NIST has worked on, and like what we're understanding is they are going forward, going to commit to about 15 to 20% of the full database, enriching it. And certainly I would imagine those are the higher priority areas and areas where they have longstanding relationships. So we think this is really important for us to look at. We've done some research on how we can use a combination of AI and tokens with human review and actually be able to get us closer up to 100% in what we're able to do. So there's some real interesting implications that Mythos has taught us. So they've found that being able to sort of create an attack path of, for example, maybe 4 different vulnerabilities that have low risk scores from the CVSS, for example, is how do we think about that going forward when you combine those and it's actually a very high severity, high risk vulnerability? So we've got to probably think about some changes. So maybe we keep things as they are, but we learn from the telemetry we gain and we come up with some new ideas on how to do that. But think of like an outside-in attack where you get a foothold at a website and then you just have several different vulnerabilities that step by step increase the privilege until you're at a very high level of access. So workstream 6, which I'll just sort of throw out there in a somewhat of a generic basis, is we're talking about all these different organizations and the different telemetry, the different intelligence that they have, is that it's important for us to understand that AI vulnerabilities will present themselves differently across different sectors. And so we may actually find a new class of vulnerability that's not going to go through the traditional vulnerability scanning chain and source code scanning or red teaming. It's going to come from some different things where it's actually already an exploit that's active and in the wild. So it's going to be interesting to follow a lot of these. So when we think about this, some of the different concepts is just like, we got to understand that we're going to see these raw signals. We've got to normalize this. We got to score things. We got to route it. And then we've got to update these standards. So what's really important for us is that we want to govern this properly. We want this to be very neutral for any type of vulnerability, any place that's out there. We want to complement the ecosystem that actually we're pointing out like some of the changes in industry and how they're putting pressure on it. but it's actually done an outstanding job, and we're very proud to be part of that ecosystem. It's also very important that we are not doing this without the human. Human must be on the loop and must be verifying what we're seeing here. We've got to understand the provenance of these areas. We've got to really focus on responsible disclosure. The definition of that may be changing over time, but it's really important that we are coordinating. It's also really important that we've got to have an evidentiary standard, becomes really important. It's critically important that the telemetry that we share has the proper redaction and anonymization to preserve privacy. And we've got to be able to fix things and correct the record when a report is incorrectly submitted. So there's opportunities for all of us to participate in this, and we hope to hear from a lot of you on how you want to work through this. So obviously the AI companies in what they have, the cloud providers that are providing the infrastructure to deliver a lot of this, the software vendors, the open source, the ones doing OT/ICS technology, this ecosystem, researchers, the individual standards bodies. And I'd really love to see a lot of effort and interest from the philanthropic organizations, the ones that are working in the public interest on AI safety and security for the long term, on how they can participate. So the observatory, again, what it is we want to be something that's neutral. We want it to be something that is modern. We want this to be a public good. We want this to be a bridge. We want it to be very open in the tooling we provide. We want to be very coordinated, and we want to federate. So this is not something that's replacing things you already know. This is not something to do a round peg in a square hole. This is not something to call out different vendors in different ways. It's about being transparent. And automation becomes very important with this, but the human must be in the loop. I hope that this gives you some things to think about. I hope that this is something that you want to participate in. And it's really important more and more as we work as individual organizations, improving our AI safety, security posture, and our readiness for the future, that we look at a collective defense approach for this era. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and let's work together on these issues. Thank you very much.